Disclaimer, you don't have to agree with my views, but if you want to express disagreement, please keep it civilized. Thank you.
What's up, everyone? This is Irish Disaster. Welcome to my channel. Anyway, I've been hearing some talk lately that there will be another installment in the Saints Row franchise, and right now I'm kind of on the fence about it. I still have yet to see if there will, in fact, be a spiritual successor to Saints Row 2, or if it will be continuing the more low-brow direction. My guess is more of the latter, but hey, a guy can dream, can't he? Out of all the sandbox games that borrowed from Grand Theft Auto 3 onward, and let's be honest, Driver 2 as well, Saints Row 1 and 2 completely knocked all of those other games out of the water, especially shit like Sleeping Dogs, which almost bored me to tears. And they're definitely not mediocre like a lot of haters say they are. There are not very many games I like of the 7th generation, or even the 8th, so to have at least this one in particular go back to the way I like it for at least one or two further installments would be a blessing, because nothing has exactly filled the void. For the record, I'm not saying Saints Row 3 and 4 are bad as games on their own, as they did have their share of redeeming qualities, but the fact that Volition would try to pass them off as spiritual successors in one of the only video game stories I ever really cared about is nothing short of insulting. It's like they must think I'm too stupid to tell the difference. I played games like this for the sole purpose of getting away from all that excessive sci-fi and fantasy material that clutters up the shelves at game stores every day, always shoving its boring stories down my throat. And I know a lot of fanboys are saying, well, if you don't like the new direction Saints Row has taken, play GTA instead. But can you name one single GTA game that offers full customization and allows you to perform activities like, say, insurance fraud, crowd control, septic avenger, trailblazing, heli assault, fuzz, drug trafficking, drive-by, hostage, and escort? Furthermore, can you name a GTA game that lets you keep multiple customized cars and have them respawn? Can you name one that allows the character you create to be part of a major plot and verbally interact in the cutscenes? Can you also name one besides San Andreas that lets you take over gang territories? I'll give you all the time in the world to answer every one of those. Say what you want about the similarities between these games, but at least Saints Row improved what it borrowed from GTA, offering better play controls, far better customization, and stuff we couldn't do before in GTA and still couldn't do in it. Part of what I loved about Saints Row 1 and 2 is that they allowed me to play as myself as opposed to the usual set character, which I've been getting sick of, and in a more earthly crime-themed setting on top of all that. I play video games for the purpose of having fun, and my idea of fun involves playing as me and seeing myself become more powerful, not seeing someone else do all the fun stuff for me and learning who they are. When I'm having a bad day and I'm ready to have fun, I don't have the mental energy or the patience to get into someone else's head. Saints Row 2 gave me more than I bargained for. I could play as myself, I could even see myself doing all these brutal things to my enemies, being the most powerful and intimidating man in the city, and I loved every minute of it. As a disgruntled young adult who suffers from anhedonia and other troubles, this game relieved a lot of stress for me. I wish I could say the same thing about most other games these days, but they hardly even come close. I played Saints Row 3 and 4 the whole way through, and while they aren't exactly the worst games I've ever played, they're definitely by far two of the most overrated and overhyped games ever developed. People might say that Saints Row 1 and 2 are nothing more than GTA clones, but if that's really the case, then 3 and 4 are nothing more than GTA and Prototype with more bathroom humor and fourth wall jokes. And the map used for each of the two is without a doubt the ugliest sandbox game map I've ever looked at. It's amazing how the series can go from taking place in such a beautifully designed city as Stillwater to such a disgusting monstrosity as Steelport, which looks like Liberty City as reinterpreted by a gas huffer. Makes me wonder how people can say they had as much fun as they did navigating that eyesore. I get that it's supposed to be dystopian and highly industrial, but there is no excuse for making making every other district and neighborhood look that indistinguishable and boring. Crackdown 2 had a very dystopian setting, but at least the architecture was diverse and had some thought put into it. Furthermore, I don't get what's so unique about those two later titles in the series and how exactly they, quote, separated themselves from GTA when they're still borrowing from it in some way. Aside from being sandbox games, having in-game radio stations, and the ability to steal cars, Saints Row the Third uses a purple dildo for a weapon. Gee, I wonder where I've seen that before. Could it be that game you say that it separated itself from? And yet these drooling fanboys act like it's so innovative. Saints Row 4, on the other hand, as stated earlier, is just a comedic version of Prototype with humor that relies mostly on other copyrighted material, so it's not that original. It might have less in common with GTA than its predecessors, but it's just another game about fighting aliens, which is the majority of what I've seen on the market since day one, so it doesn't really stand out all that much, aside from having a more lowbrow sense of humor than most other games, and being one of the few to mix open-world mayhem with so much comedic zaniness of that kind, which I'll give it credit for. But how many games do we have about street gang violence in contrast to all of that? Not as many as we need, that's for damn sure. I can tell Volition only did this because they know games about aliens sell. That's the main reason gamers bitched about the earlier titles borrowing from GTA, yet they never complain about all these other generic games on the market that look and play the same. And even if those run-of-the-mill FPS games and JRPGs are not identical, I really don't give a shit, because they all look the same to me and hardly interest me at all. Volition seemed like they were pressured by the haters into ditching all their hard work on the story and selling it out just to satisfy their demands. Some people say they're having more fun taking this route, but I honestly can't comprehend how. I would have objected to it if I were part of Volition's design team. To paraphrase Benjamin King, I'd rather see my own project die with some dignity instead of becoming a sellout imposter of its former self. Also, I'm not criticizing people for liking those games either, nor am I trying to change your opinion on them, since I have friends who do. I just hate these entitled, slack-jawed fantards who act like their subjective opinions are facts, posting quite possibly the most juvenile and idiotic comments I've ever seen in defense of their respective game. Some people might argue that I just didn't get the TV, movie, and game references in Saints Row 4, but I did get a fairly large number of them, and they just weren't that funny to me. I don't play video games like Saints Row for fucking geek trivia that I could care less about. Most players laughed when they saw the scene referencing Armageddon in the prologue, but I just sat there deadpan thinking, really, Volition? You put this bad apple of an Aerosmith song on the game's soundtrack just to use a cheap movie reference? You have officially made me sick. And for another disclaimer, I'm not hating on geeks either. We've all got silly shit that we're into. A lot of you might like games about being a hero traveling to distant planets or magical lands, and that's fine by me. I, however, like games about being an urban menace and kicking ass on American soil. Mind you, I do like some of the movies referenced by Saints Row 4, especially John Carpenter's They Live and The Truman Show, but other than that, I'm just not really into things like Star Wars or Star Trek. I know GTA referenced a lot of movies, but at least that stayed true to its own material by mostly referencing gangster movies and keeping all of the sci-fi aspects as cheat codes and Easter eggs. That franchise might have even sacrificed some of its integrity by giving GTA 4 some of the weakest and most mundane side activities as opposed to all the fun ones GTA 3 and its prequel spin-offs had, but it still stayed true to its theme of mimicking a lot of the chaos that happens in the real world and having the player be a criminal as opposed to some babyface celebrity or a president. If Volition could make a spiritual successor to Saints Row 2, no fucking zombies, aliens, demons, superpowers, or fourth wall jokes in the cutscenes or main plotline, then I might have a reason to take them seriously as game developers again. Sure, there was use of a voodoo doll in that particular Sons of Samedi mission in Saints Row 2, but that was still excusable since it was very brief and stayed true to the theme of the game, as the Sons of Samedi are based on the real gang of Zopound, which also practices voodoo. Not that I expect a voodoo doll to work in real life, of course, I'm just saying that's pardonable in my book. That game has the perfect fantasy to reality ratio for me. That goes back to another point about the game, the ideas behind the gangs. One of my favorite aspects of the earlier Saints Row titles is that you fought against gangs that were intimidating because they were based on real ones. The ones in Saints Row the Third, however, just look and act like a bunch of sexually confused comic book rejects. There's hardly anything even remotely intimidating about any of these fruits in the syndicate. I don't see any real gangs prancing around dressed like cosplayers when I go into a bad part of town or watch gang documentaries. I think what Volition should do for the next one is make a successor taking place in a new city that's just as diverse as Stillwater, with 3 all-new and realistic gangs and a more realistic plot with that perfect mix of drama and humor, but also have a DLC that continues following the plot and/or formula of 3 and 4, with superpowers, aliens, goofy weapons, etc. That way both sides of the fan base will be satisfied. And if that doesn't satisfy that group of fanboys who want every little thing their way, tough shit for them. The DLC can be to that what the Undead Nightmare is to Red Dead Redemption, which to me is one of the most brilliant DLC ideas ever. I honestly don't see why Volition can't give back to the fans that loved this series from the beginning and appreciated all the hard work put into them, while still catering to their new audience. I might make a separate video with a wish list of things I'd like to see in a new Saints Row title. Anyway, this is Irish Disaster. Thanks for watching and have a good one.